Good evening, everybody. 7 o'clock, so we're ready to get our Bible class underway. A few announcements we want to review. As you look over the Exhorter bulletin that we print every week, there's quite a few recurring names the last several weeks. Jim Formallo is a more recent one, having some heart issues. We want to keep him in our prayers and encourage him, reach out, but Larry Bird was, I don't know if they're still out of town, but they were down in Los Angeles area yesterday and probably still there today, I imagine, getting some consultation. Found cancer, want to have it removed, obviously, and looking to take steps towards that end with a consultation this week. So certainly keep Larry and Nancy and all the Bird family in your prayers. Sherry Bird, Ian Silva, these are some names that have been recurring. We just want to pray to get some answers and perhaps some sort of treatment or plan of action for whatever is ailing them. It's been brought to my attention that John Peavyhouse is going to have shoulder surgery tomorrow. Be sure we say a prayer for John's sake tomorrow as well. A couple of Bible classes coming up. Tomorrow, 7 o'clock, we've got a Bible study every week at my place. Any and all are invited. Saturday morning, same thing at Paul Thompson's home, 10 a.m. every Saturday. Really good study, good opportunity to get to visit and be an encouragement to Paul in particular. So I highly encourage you to, when you get an opportunity, participate in that study. If you'll mark your songbooks, we'll sing number 287 in just a moment. Jimmy Young has the invitation, and at the conclusion, we'll have Robert Schoaf dismiss us in a prayer before we go to our different Bible classes. One final thing comes to my mind. High schoolers, we're not going to be upstairs tonight. There's a bunch of stuff that people were working on today, ironing boards and random stuff, so the room's a little messy upstairs. So high schoolers, we're going to be at the end of this hallway on the right. It's room 3. If you're in the large room, that's John Bradford teaching tonight. You can go to that one if you want, but if you want to be at the regular high school class, the next room down at the end of the hallway on the right. Do the elders have any other announcements? Okay, Jimmy.
Good evening. Recently, I was driving down the road, and I was driving by an empty field off to my left. And as I was driving, out of nowhere, I saw a hawk descending across my vehicle toward the field really fast. And it went down into that field, and without even stopping, it did one of those touch-and-go grabs. And it snatched something off of the ground and started to fly away. And I could see a squirrel in its talons as it was flying away. And it was really neat. You might not be impressed at all with that. These days you could see much more interesting things on TV. You can see anything kill any other thing all the time. So a squirrel and a hawk is not that interesting. But for some reason, seeing it in person was more moving. It was more impactful. And I started to think, what kind of experience is that for a squirrel to be in the field, doing whatever squirrels do in a field, and all of a sudden, hey, I'm in the sky. What's going on? I don't feel very good. A hawk's got me. That squirrel is just minding its own business, looking at the things around it, and it failed to look up, and so it died. And so it's an easy, obvious parallel, because people are not much wiser when it comes to thinking about what's going on up above them. In Matthew chapter 24, verses 37 through 39, Jesus says, "For the coming of the Son of Man will be just like the days of Noah. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark. and they did not understand until the flood came and took them all away. So will the coming of the Son of Man be. People in the days of Noah were doing all their normal things. They were doing everyday activities, just looking at what was going on right around them. But they were not looking up. They were not thinking about God. They were not seeing the destruction that was imminent. And Jesus said when he comes again, it's going to catch a lot of people just like that. We'll be doing our normal things, failing to look up, failing to recognize God, and it will be too late for many, many people. So the question for us tonight to think of is, am I one of those people? Am I so absorbed in my daily activities that I fail to stop and think? That I could be just like a squirrel with a hawk about to come down and snatch it into the air? Am I prepared if Jesus comes again? If you're not prepared, we would love an opportunity to help you be more prepared. If you're not a Christian and you need to be baptized, we can do that for you tonight. If you're a Christian who needs prayers of the brethren tonight for whatever reason, we offer that invitation. Just please come forward while we stand and sing the invitation song.
Will you pray with me? Heavenly Father, we thank you again for this evening where we could gather as a congregation in your name to learn from your word. Lord, I pray that you would bless those who are teaching and those who are willing to be taught. Lord, I pray that those who are here that did not respond, that they would find the courage to respond to the invitation that was given. Lord, knowing that we are here as loving brethren, not to condemn, but to lift up. Let us be available to one another, to this world, to be lights to this world, Lord. Be with us as we depart here. Keep us safe. Keep those who are awaiting test results. Comfort them. Comfort those who are sick, those who are grieving. And help those who are with joy to share that joy, to bring those of us up with them. And it's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.
All right. How are we doing on that? Does that sound good? Okay, good. We have a new procedure with this thing. We hang it upside down to see if that makes a difference. Evidently it does. We are studying the book of Proverbs, and we are in the second Solomonic group, the second section. We're trying to hurry through this particular section, but it's a little bit of slow going because of the nature of the text. We remember that it is composed of antithetical couplets, two lines that show the other side of the coin, for lack of a better term. Comparison. One thing is good, another thing is not so good. Now, our method of operation as we go through this at this present time is we're just going through each chapter. We are looking for repeating ideas. And when we get those repeating ideas, we might not even lay all of them out. We're looking for repeating ideas with new information that we haven't already covered. So if it seems like I'm skipping a lot, no, I'm not. You might be, but I'm not. If you look at the questions at the beginning of each chapter, it says, make a list of repeating ideas. That's your job. And then we highlight the ones that give us some new information, maybe on things that we have already seen before this point. Now, last week we were talking about, say, for instance, discipline. And we saw that discipline, it was not just for kids. Now, discipline is going to come back to us tonight. We're going to find a chapter where that subject is mentioned prominently. We talked about being established, building a good life. And brethren, if one of the basic reasons you go through Proverbs is to get principles by which you can build a good life. And a good life does not just happen. If you want a good life, you have to build it. Got back to the idea of the wife. Chapter 12 and verse 4, an excellent wife is a crown to her husband. A wife can either be a crown or an embarrassment. It can go either way. Now, to finish chapter 12, as we concluded last week, we said we were going to give fool lessons. And that's what we're going to do. Let's go back to chapter 12 and verse 15. This is easy. There isn't anything profound. There isn't anything deep about it. It just needs to be remembered. Jimmy, would you read chapter 12, verses 15 and 16? I realize that nobody aspires to be a fool. Nobody wants to be. But if you wanted fool lessons, 2 easy steps that would guarantee that you would succeed at being a fool, here's what it is. Now, as we look at this, I'd ask everybody to see if you can relate to it, but it's one time or another, I'm sure we all have. Let's start out with the 15th verse. When you look at verse 15, now I'm going to say verse 15 is the number one quality of the fool. All right, Jimmy read it, so we'll pick on him. Well, he's getting all the work tonight. When you look at verse 15, what's the number one quality of a fool? Okay. Number one quality of the fool, he is just always, he's always right. He's never wrong. He can't even imagine the possibility that he could be wrong. And if you think he's wrong, you just don't understand the situation. Because he's right. Now, think back for a moment and remember the story of Nabal. in 1 Samuel chapter 25. You remember the story of Nabal, David, Abigail, Nabal's wife? Before she went to meet David, one of the servants came up to her and told her what had happened, and the servant made a comment about Nabal. Does anybody remember what the comment was? The name means fool. Nabal means fool, so he's definitely a fool, and that was referenced. But he made the point, you know what kind of guy your husband is. You can't even talk to him. This is what we're getting at. He's always right. You can't even talk to him. It's a waste of time. Now, let me ask you, everybody, raise your hand when you have an answer, but don't say anything. How many of you know somebody who's always right? They just think they're always right. Most of us do. What a joy it is to be around that person. Can't even talk to them. Waste of time. Now, the person who thinks he is always right, where is he placing himself on the ladder? Why should I ask counsel of anybody? I'm right about everything anyway. So I'm just wasting my time. I won't even talk to people about it. Now, if you have this problem, and is it possible to have this problem and not even know it? Okay. Sometimes, a lot of times you'll hear me talk about specifics and generalities. This is a very general idea. This is a specific instance. There are people that will admit, oh yeah, I can be wrong, generally speaking, but you'll never find a specific instance where they come out and admit it. I could be wrong, but I'm not wrong right now. And I'm never wrong right now. I just might be sometime. Number one quality of the fool. Now the next one, verse 16, a close second. A fool's anger is known at once, but a prudent man conceals dishonor. What's the second? He blows up. He is quick-tempered. He's always right, and he blows up. Can't control his anger or uses anger as a tool. Well, now, why should he blow up? Why should he get upset? Because somebody suggested that he might be wrong about something. And how could anybody even suggest that I might be wrong about something? And since they did, I will blow up in an effort to... Why does this guy blow up the way he does? Sometimes is it calculated? We always assume it's totally out of control, but is it always? So why would you blow up? Yes. I'm going to intimidate you. You suggested I'm wrong. I'm going to raise my voice and get mad in an effort to intimidate you, and maybe we'll stop this conversation. Now, that kind of thing, it might end the conversation, but everybody knows that this guy's a what? He's a fool. And that's just really simple. If you want fool lessons, it's just as easy as it can possibly be. Just never admit you're wrong about anything. When somebody suggests you are, you blow up in their face until they shut up. And that's pretty much the fool. Any comments? Yeah. Well, even that with the acting out, sometimes we like to give people the benefit of the doubt and say they just can't control themselves. But sometimes is the tearing things up, throwing things around, cuffing people around, is that calculated? Yes. Because you might have a better argument than me, but I might have a better right hand than you. And so sometimes that's the way we end an argument. Any other comments? Frank. Yes. It is pointless. There will be one proverb we come across: when you enter the presence of a fool, go. Because this guy, if you confront him long enough, you'll say, it is pointless. And these people end up on an island with nobody but people who are just like them. Any other comments? Okay, let's go to chapter 13. Page 13. This one on discipline. We're back to the subject of discipline. We were introduced to it earlier. In this chapter, chapter 13, we're going to look at 3 comments that are made on the subject of discipline. We said last week discipline is not just a subject for kids. The way it's addressed in Proverbs, it extends beyond children. In chapter 13 and verse 1, a wise son accepts his father's discipline, but a scoffer does not listen to rebuke. Okay, a wise son accepts father's discipline. What's the age cutoff? 16? When they get 16, they know everything there is to know. 20? 30? There is no age here. Now, if a son wants to be wise, listens to the father. Now, I'll have you know that means the father doesn't make any mistakes. I'm a father. I don't make mistakes. Jimmy needs to listen to me all the time because I'm always right. Didn't we just discuss that? Okay, obviously I'm not always right. Are there individual situations where I could be wrong? Got some stories to tell, but I won't. Think of discipline as an ongoing thing, and discipline, the word discipline means instruction. It does not imply beating. The word itself means instruction. You are discipling, disciplining, taking somebody in the direction they need to go. Now, if you look at discipline as an ongoing process, moving people in the direction they need to go, whose judgment would you trust? If you're looking at this as an ongoing thing, person that's been there. Yeah, they're going to make mistakes. There's nobody that's perfect. But if you're looking at it as an ongoing process, you're looking for somebody who has been down the road and you're going to be willing to listen to them. Now, here is a question that, give me some answers for this. Why would a child reject the counsel of a father or a mother? Reasons that you could think of as to why a child would not want to listen to a father or mother. They ask a lot. They ask much. Some of it's not easy. Pardon me? Rebellion? I don't know what makes children rebel. There are some cases you can figure it out, but have you seen kids who rebelled and for the life of you, you had no answer for it? Is there such a thing as a rebellious streak that maybe there may be a reason, but you don't know how to account for it? Ed. Do daddies sometimes prove themselves to be a fool, just like we just saw? Always right. I'm always right, kid. I can't be wrong. Pow. That kind of thing. Sometimes that happens. Ask too much, rebellious nature. And we're picking on Dad right now, father's example. Dad sets a bad example. Other reasons. Yes, Matthew? Hypocrisy. Yeah, we'll just put that right here. Underline that. Bad example. Hypocrisy. Yes.
My friends, so that's one of the reasons why they don't want to listen because they the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. There's a little rebellion there because they want that instead of what they got there. Instead of you're a little more disciplined at your house.
I found myself strangely unmoved when my kids said, my friend's parents do this. That did not affect me too much. But I understand the argument. It does sometimes. I'm going to put one up. How about just plain old pride? What do I mean by pride? Have you ever seen a smart aleck teenager that thought he knew everything and didn't need to be told anything? No, we've never seen that, have we? Anything else? Oh, you're lecturing me. Everything is a lecture. I'm tempted to say, which of you haven't heard that somewhere along the line? You're lecturing me. Yep. Jimmy? Oh, my goodness. Propaganda. Propaganda that comes from TV, from the media and the school system. There's all kinds of reasons. Any more? Yes. I'm running out of space. I would, that one right there, that probably gets underplayed. Because are there kids who feel exasperated? Doesn't matter what I do, they're not going to be happy with me. That happen? Is there some validity to it? Have you seen parents that treated their kids in such a way you realize that kid can't win? But this quality, exasperation, are there wives that feel like doesn't matter what they do, they can't make their husband happy? Are there husbands that feel like doesn't matter what they do, they can't make their wife happy? Exasperation's a problem across the board. Yes. You're obviously You're obviously stupid. You can't work this remote. You can't work this remote. How could you possibly know anything about morality or what's good and bad? Does that happen? I don't know why that hit a button. Anything else?
Not been had much consistency or discipline in the home, and then now you want to be very disciplined. That's going to be very, very hard on a child.
I'm going to put hot and cold. And one more I'm going to put up. How about favoritism? If the parents have shown favoritism to one child over another, yeah. Yeah. Okay, let me ask this. Let's go back. The younger ones may not be able to relate to this. But say back in the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, when times were different, was there more of a tendency to find kids who were deathly afraid of their father? My grandfather, who I never met, his dad once broke his arm with a board. And later in life, his brother had to talk my grandfather out of killing my great-grandfather. He had the gun. He was going to go kill him. And his brother talked him out of it. He was a mean, mean man. He was good to my dad, but he was terrible to his own son. These kind of things. Some of this is generational, and some of it is a misunderstanding or an overlooking of what the Bible has to say about discipline. Because you notice here we're talking about the willingness to accept discipline. Accept it, administer it. Those are two different things. These are reasons why sometimes people don't want to listen. They don't want to hear the instruction. But then the time comes when they have to administer or impart discipline. Now, this person's going to have a really rough time imparting discipline. If you can't accept it, you're sure not going to impart it very well. There's going to be major, major obstacles. A wise son accepts his father's discipline. These are some of the things that get in the way, and we need to be cognizant of them. It's also true that sometimes people just make excuses. These aren't the real reasons, but sometimes they are. And we just have to be aware of that. Now, let's go down to the 18th verse for a moment. I'm going to have to give this board a good cleaning. The 18th verse. Poverty and shame will come to him who neglects discipline, but he who regards reproof will be honored. Now this again is in reference to the willingness to accept discipline. Two roads. The road I go down will be determined by my willingness to accept discipline. Poverty and shame honor. There are exceptions to every rule. I understand that. But if we are speaking generally means big percentage. And we're not going to pick on girls right now, even though we could. Because, boy, anymore, there's not that much difference in behavior. The bad boys that you've known that just weren't going to listen, how did they end up? Two roads. Where do they usually end up? Is it honor? Boy, they really do well in this world. Or is it poverty and shame? That's pretty easy. The guys that can't listen, the guys that can't accept discipline, always have an excuse. They're always right. Like the fool who's always right. That pretty much determines their road. And by the way, in the 18th verse, does it really specify who's given the discipline? Father? Yes. There are some. I've known a whole lot more who weren't wealthy. Of course, if you ever work on a construction track, you'll become cynical and jaded about people who don't listen. I don't know how many employees I had that used to laugh about how they used to skip out on school. And every single one of them had more talent in their hands than I did. So why are they working for me instead of me working for them? I listened to my father, and they didn't. That's not me bragging. I was handed things on a silver platter.
This exception, so this proverb is not true. Well, I don't need to go to college because, well, Bill Gates didn't graduate or Hewlett Packard, they started their business out of their garage. Well, those are the exceptions, to the rule. These guys, not everyone who starts a business out of a garage, has a multi-billion-dollar company.
Those are the guys with the 200 IQs.
Who are super smart and don't get lucky. They're born.
I had an example last week. Pick your road. Now let's go to 24. Now we go from accepting discipline to administering discipline. And this is the era that you're born into. Sometimes it doesn't affect the nature of truth, but it does affect the way you view things. And sometimes I really believe that the past generation we were talking about, where young people sometimes tended to be deathly afraid of their father. Sometimes it was due to a running amok with verses of Scripture that should have been better understood. Verse 24, he who withholds his rod hates his son, but he who loves him disciplines him diligently. Okay. If you love your son, you discipline. Okay, what's the word discipline mean? We already said it. It means to instruct. Discipline is instruction. If you love your son, you instruct your son. Yep. Yep. We're going to discipline you, kid. You're not going to like it. If you love your son, you discipline. Now, is discipline a positive or a negative thing? Pardon me? It's how it's used. It can be. It definitely has some negative aspects to it. The thing I want to point out: the rod is not inherent in discipline. Discipline is instruction. Is the rod a part of it? Look at that verse. He who withholds his rod hates his son. Discipline is instruction. Can you discipline a kid without using a rod? Sure. If I don't like the way Jimmy's pulling weeds on a Saturday morning, we've just backed up. He pulls them better than I do. But if I don't like the way he pulls weeds on a Saturday morning, I just hit him with a rake. No. What do? Here's how you pull the weed, Jimmy. That's discipline. Discipline is when you instruct, when you point them in the way they should go. When does the rod come into it? When they're just really stubborn. Now, oh, wait a minute. This is going out over the waves, isn't it? I better be a little bit careful. I don't know much about horses. I was always afraid of horses. Do people sometimes whip horses? Do you whip them all the time? Why? Won't that make them a better horse? So why would you whip them? I'm guessing that a horse would have to be seriously out of control and you really need to get control of him. That's my guess. You got a dog. You beat your dog all the time? All right, 3 days ago my dog did something I didn't like, so I'm going to beat him today. Does the dog understand why I'm beating him? No. If he does, right now, if I'm beating him for fun, is it going to make him a better dog? You're killing the dog for no good reason. Okay, a lot of that depends on how well you like your dog, huh? Okay, you got a son. You want to discipline your child. If you beat him just because you enjoy beating him, is he going to end up any better than your dog or your horse? You better have a reason before you go there. There's something about that verse I really want to point out. By the way, the word rod, if you want to know, well, is there some kind of mystic meaning for the word rod that we can say that it doesn't really mean a rod? Keep your finger here and let's go to Exodus 21. This is the same word. Exodus 21 and verse 20. If a man strikes his male or female slave with a rod and he dies at his hand, he shall be punished. What is a rod in that verse? Big heavy stick that can kill somebody if you overdo it. That's a rod. Now, we come back to what we're looking at here. Yeah, rod is the same word. Now, rods can be in various sizes, but this rod that is being used in a disciplinary effort, it's a stick. Now, in the past, go back in time, it was almost like people delighted in the idea, oh, I showed my kid. I really obeyed the Scripture. I beat that kid senseless. When you look at that verse, what is in that verse that ought to cause you to pause? What is he having to do to the Father? Use the rod, which indicates that the Father might be inclined not to use the rod. If you're talking about difference between a good father, bad father, where a rod is concerned. Good father, does he really want to? Doesn't really want to. But every once in a while a situation may come up that just demands it. A bad father, such as scares his kids to death, does he want to? You ever seen a father that acted like he's looking for an excuse to beat his kid because it makes him happy? Mike.
The fact that they're up there in the room waiting for you, that's fear and intimidation, and maybe worse than you spanking them. But I think you have to make sure that when you administer some type of rod, you do it when you are under control and not angry.
Yeah.
Never discipline when you're angry. But some children may be, if you look at them cross-eyed, that's the rod. I mean, each child is different on how you administer the rod or the discipline.
You got to know your kid. Well, you got to know when the dog's really a problem. Pardon the illustration. But like my dad, I was never afraid of my dad. Even though I knew he's coming home, he's going to give me a spanking because he wasn't going to be out of control. I never worried that he was going to start hitting me and then forget to stop. It just wasn't going to happen. And, you know, that's when sometimes you run into problems. Where the rod is concerned, if you have parents who are naturally hesitant because they don't enjoy using the rod, well, that's the attitude that you're kind of looking for, as opposed to somebody that, I'm going to show that kid. Yes. Yeah. If we take it back to that previous time era, you think there weren't a lot of kids that questioned whether or not their parents really loved them? Probably were. And that was bad. Comments? All right, let's flip the page here. Let's go to the 14th chapter. But honestly, from some of the old timers, I have heard stories about what parents did that just curl your hair. Okay, 14 and verse 1. The wise woman builds her house, but the foolish tears it down with her own hands. Got just a minute. Wait a minute. This is pure genius. Look at this. If I can. Y'all didn't think I was that smart, did you? How many years have I been using that board and not thought of that? The wise woman builds her house, but the foolish tears it down with her hands. Okay, in chapter 11, verse 16, we had the gracious woman. Chapter 12 and verse 4, we had the excellent wife, and now we are to the wise woman. This is the woman a guy's looking for, and this is the woman a girl should aspire to be. I'd like to notice a couple of basic assumptions in that first verse. The wise woman builds her house, but the foolish tears it down with her own hands. First assumption, there is such a thing as a woman. There is somebody that you identify as a woman. This is a woman. Keep your finger here and turn to Deuteronomy 22. Deuteronomy 22. Deuteronomy 22 and verse 5, a woman shall not wear a man's clothing, nor shall a man put on a woman's clothing, for whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord your God. What's that tell you about transgender? Why don't you mix clothing? Because you don't want the confusion. It's really simple. There's such a thing as a man, there's such a thing as a woman, and you shall not confuse the issue. All right, so there's such a thing as a woman, and if we go back to Proverbs 14 and verse 1, next assumption we're making here is we're talking about a married woman. Because this wise woman that we are talking about, she has a house to build. Now you might think, well, that's assuming a little too much. A single person can build a house. Yes, they can. But for our purposes tonight, we are assuming that we are talking about a married woman who is building her house. Now, if you wonder what that is, that's a foundation. We understand that anytime you build a house, you have to start out with a solid foundation, so we're going to dispense with that very quickly. Here's the foundation. Matthew 7, verses 24 through 27. Sermon on the Mount said, where Jesus says, if you want your life to be worth anything, you build on me. You listen to my words. So if we talk about a wise woman building her house, there's the foundation. There's the starting point. Now, these next 3 points we'll try to outline pretty quickly. We're starting here with spiritual values, and then we're talking about, okay, where do we go from there once we have a foundation of spiritual values established? What do we do in the real world? First, Genesis 2:18. We'll make this fast. God made a helper for Adam. If I'm a woman building my house, one thing I have to understand is I was made to be a helper. If I have a husband, one of my roles in life, primary role in life, you might say, is to support him. Make his life successful. Make it possible for him to do the things he is supposed to be doing. This has become such a hang-up in our society. I think it's really one of the keys to why things have fallen apart. Next thing I would put in there, Proverbs 31, just going up the ladder. We don't have time right now. We will probably have to do this more next week. I shall mark that. That shows activity. If I'm building my house, I'm active. I'm a helper to my husband. I am active. What do you think about lazy men? Guys that don't like to do anything. Are there lazy women? There can be lazy men, there can be lazy women. Helper, active, Titus 2, emphasize family. Where Paul gives instructions. I want you to tell the older women to do this, the younger women to do that. Right, here's your foundation. You build your house on Jesus. What do I mean build my house? I'm a helper to my husband. I'm active. I emphasize my family. Now, these are critically important things. We'll have to pick up there. Here's the question that we leave off with. If you're a woman and you see me diagram that and you say, easy for you, you're male. I understand. What don't you see up there? Well, is this all about everybody else? What about? Where's me? We shall pick up next week. Yes? This is the world we're living in. Now, before anybody despairs, just remember, the world has gone through phases before. How did Sodom get to be like it was? It's all happened before.